in Kenya, where the president and other heads of states and heads of government are there for the Africa Forward Summit organized by the French government in collaboration with the Kenyan government, President Ruto and President Emmanuel Macron, all co-hosting this particular event. I think you can see from there some of our ministers. I can see industry, trade and investment, as well as Taiwo Yedele, the Minister of Finance and coordinating Minister of the Economy, waiting on the president's arrival. This was yesterday, actually, so there is an updated part of it where that summit is holding, where collaboration seeking new frontiers. I was listening, Bukola, to I think one of the ministers in Kenya who was talking to the BBC, and he was being asked what exactly is France up to, because the Sahel has actually chased the French nation out of their region because of, you know, the many things that we know about. Whether this is more like a French washing, trying to get better or more inroads into the continent of Africa via Nairobi. Curiosity arises because as well, France is, not France, Nairobi is not a francophone country. So people are asking questions. Well, the man said, look, France is a member, has a permanent seat on the Security Council in the United Nations. So that makes them an important partner in the global stage. So whatever it is that can be gotten. But the most important thing is that one of the things, according to that minister, that is being discussed, to make it clear that it's time. Africa should not just be just for extraction only, for exploitation. This should be a place where productivity, production, manufacturing, all of the elements. We don't need aid. Even though aids are coming, we should not plan based on aid. We should come to the table just like China does. You know, China comes with something on the table for all of us. So we're still monitoring to see what will be the eventual outcome. But the good thing is that, at least for the first time in a long while, I'm happy that the French government is coming to Africa to come and host this event in collaboration with Kenya, because I hate it with a passion when I see 50-something African presidents go to China for Africa-China, go to France for French and Africa. They go to the US, Africa, all of this nomenclature they used to describe. They pack our world leaders and go. And President Ruto, for instance, has been saying, for him, it's almost disrespectful. Why can't we send the chairperson of the AU or one of the few leaders of the African continent to go as a representation? Must they always go that way? So it looks like this was part of, besides France having a very tough time in Africa right now. So people are also saying that this is not really like we need France, France needs us. But, you know, everybody is pontificating as to what the intention is. But underlined is to the fact that Africa is beginning to rise. People are naturally suspicious of the intent of the West when it comes to the relationships we have. But I don't know what you think. What is important to us is what President Bola Tinubu will bring back. You know, I call it Daddy Oyoyo. He went to France. He's now in Nairobi. He should be getting to Kigali from there. So when he does all of this three-nation tour, he needs to come and explain to the people he's leading. When we say Daddy Oyoyo, what did he bring for us? That's what is important to me.
Well, we hope that he does bring some tangible things, you know, back home. But speaking to what you already pointed to during your commentary, the Kenyan president, William Ruto, spoke, addressed it as much as he could during the commencement of that summit. I believe, when he engaged with the French president, he spoke about how important it was for Africa to also level up in its relations with the West, that this partnership shouldn't be one where Africa takes and takes, but also Africa brings something to the table. And for me, that was a very, very interesting position amid this very critical summit that comes, on the heels of, as Jeffrey had said, France's seeming exit from the Sahel region. And that's, the curiosity that seems to be popping up amid this conversation, why Nigeria is appearing to become bosom friends with, a Western nation that, some of the Sahelian countries and former the the Francophone countries now, had chased out and severed relations with, and now become more, chummy, if you like, with Russia rather than France. But, France is Nigeria's perhaps second home to Mr. President. Much of his foreign visits and vacations are spent with France. So it would seem as if France, unlike other African countries, along with some other countries, a bosom, is Nigeria's leading trading partner. And, France also wants to shore up its interest in Africa as well, amid relations having been severed with its traditional, former colonies. And so how will then Nigeria and indeed other African countries participating in this summit level up? Of course, the French president has already promised about 23 billion euros in support to Africa on the heels of this summit that has only just commenced already, and that is huge, that is significant. Kenya is taking up some of it already with 11 partnerships signed, for the development of their transport infrastructure, their rail infrastructure, with even a military cooperation, for which some have criticized Kenya, saying that some of the immunity clauses in that military cooperation may not necessarily augur well for Kenya in the end, when you consider how it has gone sour with, partnerships signed prior to this time with other African countries. But how Nigeria and other African countries now show up, what they bring to the table, will make all of the difference in this Kenya-Africa summit, where they're talking about artificial intelligence, and some of the other topics coming up is international financial restructuring, climate change, amid all of that. So beyond receiving, its share of the 23 billion euro partnership that France is offering, what is Africa bringing to the table? That's what I'm more interested in, Jeffrey, this time around. If it's not seeking investment, then what in terms of human and material resources will it be bringing to the table, such that this is, an equal partnership?
Well said, Bukola, because Africa is not short of summits. We have always seen this summit. So what will happen after 12 months, 36 months, 24 months after this summit? What are we going to say? This was what we got out of this. And again, a new financial architecture is long overdue. Most of the African countries, or a lot of the African countries, let me use that conservatively to say that our credit rating, affects the ability for us to be able to borrow money at a certain interest rate. So the people like United States, even though they are one of the most indebted countries in the world, because I know in the United States it's, I think, maybe 20 or 30 something trillion in debt. I'm not sure the exact figure. But when they are rated, because of their good credit rating, maybe AAA or in the A region, they borrow at maybe 5%, 3%. But ours, when we are rated around the BBB, B minus, B plus, and all of that, or even lesser than that, you see borrowing at premium, 9%, sometimes even more than that, 12%. So all of these conversations have to happen, because one of the things choking Bukola Africa right now is the level of debt. Look at Nigeria's debt burden, 159 trillion in dollar terms, over $100 billion, I should say. If you go to other African countries as well, I'm sure if you do a comparative analytics and just maybe Google it, we'll be able to see where we are. Just imagine that is taking off. And sometimes when these countries are forced by restructuring to devalue their currency, that even makes the local currency get devalued, such that raising the money in local currency to be able to match up, if that's how it's raised, apart from oil, it becomes difficult. So for instance, we're owing maybe $1 billion 5 years ago. If we're to pay back, which they don't really pay back in that sense, if we're to pay back, we'll be talking about maybe 500 billion naira in paying back. But if that money was still being owed as 1 billion, so today we're talking about maybe 1.3 trillion. So you can see, interest, the devaluation will affect it, interest, premium, risks. There are so many things that all of these credit issues that we get, that there are so many parameters that have been looked at. You know, the easier ones are maybe our own treasury bills, our ways and means. But as soon as it goes to Euro bonds, you get to all these multilateral borrowings or bilateral borrowings or project-type borrowings. Sometimes you see the numbers get quite big. So those are the, I need the leaders to have a very honest conversation. Very honest conversation. So that it's not a question of just come in, drink tea, shake hands, and go yet again for another summit. And I agree with every leader of Africa who is saying it's time for a new world order that includes Africa on that table. When they met in Bretton Woods, I don't think Africa was represented. 44 nations met in Bretton Woods, and that's why how IMF and the World Banks were created in the 40s. I don't think we were on that seat to negotiate anything. Now it's time for us to look at and say, okay, I think what can we look at? That's why Africa is tilting maybe towards China a lot, because China approaches Africa with a bit of partnership than aid. But the future is ours for the taking.
Indeed, Jeffrey, and that's why I'm interested in what Africa is bringing. If Africa is saying that, you know, no, we shouldn't just be
we have raw materials, minerals.
But then, you know, those raw materials are being, you know, mined here. They're taking wholesale some of those raw materials, and then, you know, they're exported for production in other African countries, and that is exportation
in the West, not even African countries.
Sorry, in the West, that is exportation of labor and capital. And capital. So, but if they were mined here, if they were turned into finished goods here, that is, you know, a good measure of capital that is retained here,
that is a
and an empowerment, you know, of our young people that is also retained here. So that retention is critical to what we bring to the table. But we're talking about international financial restructuring, and you've rightly said, you know, that devaluation doesn't necessarily work for us. After devaluation, what is still the strength of Nigeria's currency on the African continent is still one of the worst performing currencies. And so, you know, our debt has only gone, you know, up by a higher percentage, you know, against the backdrop of this devaluation. And so what we're owing is even more than what we were owing. Yes, compared to, you know, what the terms were when, you know, partnerships were signed, you know, documents were signed for borrowing. And so those are the conversations that should be had with the leaders of the West. And so Africa should come up showing stronger, you know, with those, you know, investment deals that are signed, such that some of those, you know, gray areas work better for Africa. The negotiations should be stronger, such that they work better for Africa, such that, you know, we can retain a lot of those foreign exchange back home instead of them being exported you know, outside the country.
Yes, at the heart of it is geopolitics. That's in fact, the heart of it is global peace, because interests may mismatch and misalign, and that can cause a lot of trouble. But I think at this point, it's time for us to have that honest conversation and see how it helps all of us, because Africa is due for a transformation. I remember when President Donald Trump visited the Gulf nation, the 3D Gulf. I think he went to Qatar, he went to Saudi Arabia, and one other country in the Gulf nation. And something he said I will never forget. He says it's modern miracle, the Arabian way. We need to look for our own modern miracle, the African way. Neoliberal policies sometimes don't work as we expect it to work. We are very good at adopting ideologies, economic ideologies, not looking at the uniqueness of our own environment. I've always told people there's nothing wrong with subsidy if you can fund it, but there's everything wrong with subsidy if you cannot fund it. So we have to look at ourselves and know how we're going to manage this. I brought in the subsidy issue because now crude price is still above $100, and
President Trump has already said that the Iran deal is shaky. You know, so we're not exiting this period anytime soon.
You know, I told you guys that the closest we can get to getting out of this situation maybe August. I praised earlier, but the data shows is between 5 to 1 year. So let's just brace up. But what is happening locally in our country? Well, the JAM decision.
Okay, I was hoping we'll get to Plateau State
before
we get to JAM. That is also very important. According to reports, the Plateau governor is visiting some communities that have suffered attacks in recent times. Yes, this is it. He has visited Nding community in Barikin Ladi local government area, and this comes after recent attacks that claimed several lives and left many families devastated. He was received by officials in Barikin Ladi local government area, and he met with children and survivors of the attack, offering words of comfort and reassurance. I'm sure that, Plateau residents are quite familiar with the many visits of the governor in recent times. We recall his visit to Anguan Rukuba in Jos, where attacks claimed quite a number of lives, and he had, arrived at that scene at that time in an armored tank, and the youths insisted that he comes down from the vehicle to address them. But beyond the visit to victims of attacks, beyond the words of comfort offered, beyond reassurances that this will be dealt with, what changes significantly? And perhaps this is a good time to ask what happened to the promised CCTV cameras by Mr. President following the flyby visit he made to Jos after the attack in Anguan Rukuba that claimed the lives of many. Have those CCTV cameras even been, purchased? Have the contract even been, initiated, the documentation done for those cameras to be purchased in the first place? Evidently, no. This is even after the attack on mourners in another area of Plateau that occurred over the weekend. Mourners who were bearing their loved ones were attacked yet again, and we saw, videos surfacing online that appeared to, show people running for dear life in an open field. And according to reports coming through from Plateau State, we hear that the police command denied that that ever even occurred in the first place. But right after that, we have seen yet another attack, this time in Barikin Ladi, local government area in Jos, where a number of people have also been killed. When are we going to exit this very sad time in Plateau State? It appears as if the state government is not in control of the situation. It appears as if the state government is helpless in the face of things. And, there was so much promise when the governor resumed in 2023, when he in fact, let us know that there were a number of villages that were in control of bandits in Plateau State in Jos. And so if that is the healthy consensus among residents in Plateau State, that they know where the attackers are, an ethnic group is always named amid this conversation each time there's an attack. The people know who their oppressors are. So if that is the case, why does the state government seem helpless? Jeffrey.
Absolutely. Let's take a listen to the governor. We understand he made some comments to the press.
We have not come to make speeches. I've been on this matter since it started. I've been in touch with the chairman of the local government and the security agencies, trying to contain the situation when it started. And I decided to come in here to see things for myself. Let me first of all bring my condolences to the entire Nding community. Nding is not a new place for me. Those of you who know, I've been to Nding before, and I came here to celebrate the goodness of God. I'm pained that today I have to come to commiserate with you. I have many friends here, brothers from Nding here, and it's a community that I cherish very well. And I've just come this afternoon together with the Honorable Minister just to do two things. One, to commiserate with the families who lost their dear ones, and to reassure you, Nding will not go down. Amen. Nding will not go down.
It took place around 12 a.m., 12:05 a.m., when the marauders stormed this village. Our boys were keeping vigil then, but because it was raining, they decided to take shield in their homes. It was at that time that they took advantage and attacked the village. An attack that left about 11 people dead. Several others, I think about 10, are now receiving treatments in hospitals. Before then, I think about 2 weeks to the date of the attack, the marauders sent a signal by destroying several hectares of land, crops. They destroyed several hectares of land. on a large scale. As if that is not enough, a day before the attack again, they repeated the same thing. They destroyed a vast land of land again, I think several hectares, around Zogu, Pachud, and others. So that was Thursday. Then on Friday, they carried out the attack and left about 11 people dead. So I think briefly, this is what happened. 10 are already in the
Bukola, I've heard this governor of Plateau State, Caleb Mutfwang, mention it will not fall. I think I've heard him at things once, or this is the second time or so. I've heard him say promises wherever I visit or some of the places he has visited to not fall. I think the governor, with the greatest sense of respect, has to rise up to the occasion. Your people are, the value of human lives in Nigeria is quite low, and it's unfortunate. I know that this administration did not start this problem, but they inherited it, but they've not been able to solve it. At a sub-national level, some governors are not helping at all. I think the governors need to rise up. I can imagine him going there. You can see in his body language, he knows that the people are not happy to hear any more of the speeches. They just want action. They don't even want compensation. They just want to be, they don't want to be killed anymore. That's just all people are looking for. They don't want to be killed. They don't need anybody's money. They don't need the president's money. They don't need the governor's money. They don't need anybody's money. They just need to be able to go to their farms, their businesses, their whereabouts, and come back alive. And they'll sort themselves out. These killings on the plateau is becoming totally unacceptable. Even with the president's promises, visit, the president had told the lady whose son was killed, that video went viral, that it will not allow it to happen again. And I told myself, President Bola Tinubu, don't promise what you can't keep, because I know it's not going to happen, because we've not done the right thing. And yet again, not too long after that, people were killed and people are still being killed. We need to, this is the primary responsibility of government. As president, as governor of the state, you need to rise up, protect your people. I think we've said enough, but let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get to the dailies. Stay with us.